Welcome to Race to the Finish. In this series, we will take a look at some of the thrilling, down-to-the-wire playoff races in the wildcard era. The criteria for the playoff races that I will cover goes as follows. Number 1, there must have been at least 3 teams involved in the playoff race. And number 2, the featured teams can't have clinched a playoff spot until the final day of the season. There might be some exceptions to this later on, but we'll cross that road when we get there. Now, on to the first episode. The 1995 MLB season was the first since the end of the players' strike that lasted nearly 8 months from August of 94 to April of 95. Had the previous season not been interrupted by the strike, it would have been the first to feature the newly created wildcard spot in the playoffs. That was not to be, so the strike-shortened 1995 playoffs would be the first. The New York Yankees had not made the playoffs since making the World Series in 1981. At the time of the strike in 1994, they held the best record in the American League at 70-43 and a 6.5 game lead in the division. However, they are unable to recapture their form in 1995 and entered the final week of August 5 games under 500 and 4.5 back in the wild card, and 16 back in the division. The Seattle Mariners had never made the playoffs in their 19-year history as an MLB franchise, and only had 2 winning seasons. They spent most of the 95 season hovering around 500, trailing in the division by as much as 13 games on August 2nd, and 11.5 on August 24th, but they started to pick up steam by taking 3 out of 4 against the aforementioned Yankees on the last weekend of August. The California Angels had not made the playoffs since blowing a 3-1 series lead in the 1986 ALCS and had only 1 winning season since. After battling back and forth with the Texas Rangers for first place in the AL West, they took the lead seemingly for good just after the All-Star break, opening up as much as an 11-game lead. They led the division by 10.5 games entering August 17th, the last time they would hold a double-digit division lead. It's Thursday, August 3rd. The Angels lead the division by 11 games. They are looking to sweep the Mariners, who trailed the Angels by 13 games in the AL West. However, the Mariners roughed up Jim Abbott on this day and lead 10-2 in the bottom of the 7th. With no one out and runners on first and second, Tony Phillips hits a soft grounder to second. In an attempt to break up the double play, the runner going from first to second, Gary DiSarcina, tore a ligament in his left thumb while sliding into second base. While the Mariners were unable to turn 2 and the Angels scored more runs to only lose 10-7, the Angels starting shortstop, who was batting .317, would be out for over a month. At the time, it didn't seem like a huge issue, as the Angels would go 10-7 over their next 17 games, maintaining a 9.5 game lead in the division. On Monday, August 21st, the Angels welcomed the AL East leading Boston Red Sox for a 3-game series. This was an exciting series to look forward to in the baseball world, as it featured 2 teams that had around a 10-game lead in their division and could possibly meet in the playoffs. The Angels lost the first 2 games 6-4. Tough luck. The Angels looked to avoid the sweep on a nationally televised affair on ESPN. After falling behind 3-0 and 5-3, the Angels came back to tie it up. It went to the 10th, where Mike Greenwell hit a go-ahead RBI triple. The Angels went down in order in the bottom half of the inning, losing the 3 games by only a combined 5 runs. It didn't help that Tony Phillips couldn't handle a John Valentine grounder in the first inning, who later scored, charging Jim Abbott with an unearned run. It didn't help that Jim Edmonds had an unsuccessful sacrifice bunt in the bottom of the 8th, especially since Tim Salmon singled up the middle in the next at-bat, a ball Tony Phillips likely would have scored on. It didn't help that JT Snow struck out swinging with Edmonds and Salmon on third and second respectively with 2 outs. Although the Angels regained their composure and beat the Orioles the next night, they lost the final 3 games of that series and then embarked on an East Coast road trip they'd like to forget. During that series loss to the O's, the Mariners had just eclipsed the 500 mark. In the first of a 4-game series against the Yankees, Jay Buhner hit a grand slam in the first inning to give the Mariners an early lead, but the Yankees stormed back with 7 unanswered runs of their own. Edgar Martinez added an RBI in the 5th and 8th inning to cut the lead to 1, but the Mariners still trailed with 2 outs and nobody on against closer John Wetland. Vince Coleman drew a walk on a full count to keep the game alive. He then stole second. Then he stole third. Then scored on Joey Cora's single to tie the game. Next up was Ken Griffey Jr., who was out with an injury for nearly 3 months, and he hit the first pitch he saw over the right field fence for a walk-off home run. The Mariners took 3 of 4 from the Yankees this series, and while the M's would still be 9.5 out in the division, they were only 2 back in the wild card and started to gain some momentum. The weekend before being swept by the Red Sox, the Angels took 2 of 3 from the Yankees. As mentioned earlier, the Yankees were a disappointment this season. The team, which had AL East aspirations, sat 5 games under 500, having lost 9 of their last 10, and just returned from a 3-10 road trip. These two teams, though, were about to head in opposite directions. The Yankees swept the Angels, including a 12-4 and 11-6 shellacking. The first was won by Yankees starter David Cone, who was acquired from the Blue Jays at the trade deadline. The Angels reportedly were interested in him, but instead decided to trade for Jim Abbott. The Angels traveled up the road to Boston, where results didn't fare better. They were swept again, including defeats of 11-3 and 8-1. If you've noticed anything from these box scores, the Angels are giving up runs early and often. All-star Chuck Finley and trade deadline acquisition Jim Abbott, who had pitched well in the first half of the season, had lost their form. Finley's ERA was at one point below 3. Now it was above 4. Abbott had a 3.36 ERA with the White Sox, but now had a 4.2 ERA in his 7 starts with the Angels. Damian Easley and Rex Hoodler were not able to fill the void of DiSarcina's .317 batting average. In the time of this 9-game losing streak, the Angels' division lead went from 8.5 games to just 5.5. Fortunately for them, the Rangers only went 2-7 in this time period, but the Mariners were able to overtake them for second place, having gone 6-3 in that time span, and taking 2 out of 3 from the Red Sox at Fenway Park just before the Angels were swept there. The Mariners were now tied with the Royals for the AL wildcard spot. The Angels finally broke their 9-game losing streak with a 5-3 win in Baltimore. However, the Angels would lose the last 2 games of that series. Fun fact, did you know that Cal Ripken's famous home run, where he broke the record for most consecutive games played, was against the Angels? I did not know that until doing research for this video. Fortunately for them though, neither the Rangers nor Mariners gained ground during that time. The Angels returned home from their 1-8 road trip to face the last place Twins. Facing a cellar dweller is just what they needed, and they took advantage of 3 Twins errors en route to a 9-3 win. The next night, trailing 5-4 in the bottom of the 7th, Tim Salmon hit a 2-run home run off Pat Mahomes, who may have been more concerned about his son being born next week. On Sunday, the Angels led 7-2 after 4 innings on their way to a series sweep. However, Abbott ran into trouble in the 5th, giving up 3 runs, and the lead was now 7-5. The Twins scored 2 more in the 6th to tie it up. The Angels retook the lead in the bottom half of the inning, a lead in which they held going into the 9th. All-star closer Lee Smith at this point was 33 for 36 in save attempts, and had only given up 2 home runs all year. Dan Misteller, a 27-year-old rookie with only 1 home run and a .223 batting average, pinch hit to lead off the 9th for the Twins. Misteller worked a full count, and after fouling off some pitches, on the 9th pitch of the at-bat, he hit a home run to tie the game. Misteller would never play in the majors again after this season. The Angels, though, loaded the bases in the bottom of the inning, which featured another unsuccessful sac bunt from Jim Edmonds. Tim Salmon had the chance to walk it off, but looked at strike 3 on a full count to send the game to extras. After new reliever Mark Holtzimmer hit the leadoff batter, he retired the next 2 and got Matt Lawton to hit a grounder to third. Spike Owen, who had just come into the game as a pinch hitter in the last inning, threw this one down the right field line, allowing the runner to score all the way from first. Pat Mahomes, with his son due in just a week, got the final out of the 10th, securing the comeback victory for the Twins. Meanwhile, the Mariners had just swept the Royals up in Seattle. KC entered the series with a 1-game lead in the wild card, but that quickly evaporated. The Yankees swept the first-place Red Sox in convincing fashion, and were just half a game behind the M's for the wild card. With just 18 games to go, the AL West lead for the Angels was down to just 5 games. Just as the Angels had blown the lead on Sunday, the Mariners came back from an early 2-0 deficit, with Joey Cora collecting the game-winning RBI double in the bottom of the 8th. The Twins traveled up to Seattle looking to play more spoiler, and indeed they did. They jumped out to a 3-0 lead entering the bottom of the 6th before the Mariners scored 6 runs off starter Brad Radke. However, the Twins answered back, scoring 4 runs of their own in the top of the 7th. After the Mariners tied it off Mahomes in the bottom half of the inning, the Twins put up a 5 spot in the top of the 8th, all of which were unearned runs thanks to a throwing error from Joey Cora. Ken Griffey Jr. hit a 2-run shot in the bottom of the 9th, but it wouldn't be enough. Coupled with a Yankees win and an Angels win, this loss stung for the M's, especially against the last-place team. They now trailed in the wild card by half a game and the division by 6. All 3 teams won the next night, so the standings remained the same, but Wednesday the 13th is where things get interesting. The Indians avoided the sweep by defeating the Yankees 4-0, opening the door for the Mariners to retake the lead in the wild card. However, the Twins scored 4 runs off Randy Johnson, carrying a 4-0 lead into the 7th. At the same time, the Angels led the White Sox 1-0 after 7, just 2 innings away from a series sweep. The Mariners made it a 1-run game thanks to a Jay Buhner RBI single and a Mike Flowers 2-run home run. Right around the exact same time, rookie setup man Troy Percival came on to protect a 1-run lead in the top of the 8th for the Angels. Chuck Finley had delivered his best start in quite some time, throwing 7 shutout innings with 8 strikeouts and allowing only 5 hits and 2 walks. He had thrown 109 pitches, which was not an unreasonable amount back then. Why manager Marcel Lachman pulled him, I can't fathom. Perhaps it was because he pitched 6 innings only 4 days prior, but if your starter is dealing and your team needs wins, you gotta keep him in. Like fellow reliever Lee Smith, rookie Troy Percival had an impressive season. At that point, he had a 1.38 ERA and in 65 innings had only allowed 31 hits, only 4 of which were home runs. Ahead in the count 1-2 against Robin Ventura, he allowed a leadoff single. With a 3-2 count against the next batter Frank Thomas, he allowed a home run. Just like that, the lead was gone, even with a reliable Percival on the mound. The bleeding didn't stop, as the White Sox scored 3 more times in that inning, and another in the 9th to win 6-1. Up in Seattle, the Mariners trailed 4-3 in the bottom of the 8th, with 2 on and 2 out against Mahomes, whose son was due in less than a week. Mahomes was relieved by Scott Watson, who gave up the game-tying RBI single to Tino Martinez. Then Dave Stevens came on relief and gave up a 3-run home run to Jay Buhner, and the Mariners completed the comeback, winning 7-4. They were back in the wild card lead and only 5 back in the division. The next weekend, the Angels hosted the Royals, who were still only 2 games back of the Mariners in the wild card, while the M's traveled to Chicago to take on those same White Sox. The Mariners' late-inning magic continued, with Vince Coleman hitting a go-ahead RBI double in the 7th, which proved to be the game winner in a 3-2 victory. The next night, after trailing 3-1 entering the 7th, the M's scored twice to tie it, then scored twice more in the 9th to win it 5-3. They were unable to complete the sweep on Sunday, but they got help from elsewhere. The Yankees only managed to split a 4-game series with the Orioles, and the Angels were swept at home by the Royals. They never had a lead in any of those 3 games and didn't even score a run for the first 16 innings of the series. Just when it looked like they were finding their groove again, the losing came back. With 12 games to go, the Mariners held a 1-game lead in the wild card over the Royals, Rangers, and Yankees, and trailed in the division by only 3 games. The Mariners welcomed the Rangers to town for a 3-game series with major playoff implications. The Angels traveled to Oakland to face the A's, who were still technically mathematically alive for the playoffs. After the Mariners won the first game 8-1, they trailed Tuesday's game 4-1, entering the bottom of the 8th. Griffey hit a solo shot to cut the deficit to 2, then pinch hitter Doug Strange hit a 2-run homer to tie it in the 9th. Meanwhile, down in Oakland, the Angels trailed the A's 1-0 after 8. Jim Abbott had his best start in over a month, allowing only 1 run over 7 innings, striking out 10. Unfortunately, the Angels' offense didn't give him any run support that night. They were already shut out the previous night 4-0 and didn't want to lose for a 6th consecutive game. Troy Percival, who hadn't pitched since blowing the lead to the White Sox 6 days earlier, gave up a solo shot to Terry Steinbach, which extended the A's lead to 2-0. However, just like the Mariners, the Angels weren't done yet. Tim Salmon hit a 1-out double off future Hall of Famer Dennis Eckersley, and 2 batters later, JT Snow hit a 2-run, 2-out shot to tie the game at 2. Lachman left Percival out there for the 9th and the 10th, where he ran into some trouble after giving up a leadoff walk to Ricky Henderson. Terry Steinbach hit a walk-off bases-loaded single to win the game 3-2 for the A's. Back to Seattle, the game remained tied into the bottom of the 11th, where the Mariners had 2 on with 2 out, and Griffey at the plate with a 2-2 count.
Look, here it comes, and it swung on and lined off the glove of the third baseman Ortiz. Here comes Strange. The Mariners win it 5-4. My, oh my! The Mariners are 1 game back of the California Angels as Junior hits a line drive.
In a matter of minutes, the Angels had lost in extras, while the Mariners had won in extras. The M's were a season-high 8 games over 500 and only 1 game back in the division. The Mariners carried that momentum to an 11-3 victory the next night, while the Angels' offense struggled once again. They scored 6 runs, but all those were in the 9th inning when they were already trailing 9-0. After leading the division by as much as 11 games in early August, the Angels had done the unthinkable and completely collapsed. The only good news was that Gary DiSarcina returned to the lineup, but would his return be enough to make much of a difference? Elsewhere, the Yankees swept the Blue Jays, and the Twins finally got the chance to play spoiler, taking 4 out of 5 from the Royals. On the morning of Friday, September 22nd, the Yankees trailed the Mariners and Angels by half a game, while the Rangers and Royals trailed by 4, and the A's by 5. The Angels traveled to Arlington to take on the Rangers, both teams frustrated about being swept in the previous series. Tied 3-3 entering the bottom of the 7th, Latchman elected to keep starter Mark Langston in the game. He proceeded to give up a single, a passed ball, that wasn't his fault, an RBI single, a stolen base, and back-to-back walks. Reliever Mike James couldn't stop the damage, and the Rangers scored 4 more times in the inning en route to an 8-3 win. The Mariners welcomed the A's to town, who had just done them a favor by sweeping the Angels. The A's led 6-0 into the 4th, but the Mariners tied it thanks to a Griffey leadoff home run, a Mike Blowers RBI double, and a Vince Coleman grand slam. The A's took the lead back in the 7th, but Edgar Martinez led off the 8th with a game-tying home run, then Alex Diaz hit a 3-run home run with 2 outs to cap it off. The Mariners had gained sole possession of first place in the division for the first time since May 13th, the 15th game of the season. The Angels fell to second place in the division for the first time since July 1st. The next night, Chuck Finley gave up 5 runs in the first again, sending the Angels to their second 9-game losing streak in less than a month. The Mariners defeated the A's 7-0, with 7 1/3 shutout innings from Randy Johnson. The Yankees took the first 2 games of their series against the Tigers, officially taking control of the wildcard spot. However, they lost the series finale on Sunday, allowing the Angels to get back within half a game, and they did just that. Jim Abbott threw a complete game shutout on 107 pitches, allowing only 3 hits, and the Angels put an end to their second 9-game losing streak. Later that afternoon in Seattle, the Mariners trailed the A's 6-3 into the 6th, where Tino Martinez hit a leadoff home run to cut the deficit to 2. In the next inning, Edgar Martinez hit a 2-run, 2-out double to tie the game. In the 8th, Dan Wilson singled home pinch runner Alex Diaz after Jay Buhner reached on a throwing error to give the Mariners a late lead. That lead was short-lived, though, as Danny Tartabull hit a 2-run homer to give the A's an 8-7 lead entering the bottom of the 9th. The A's' playoff hopes were hanging on by a thread, and after playing spoiler earlier in the week against the Angels, they wanted to do the same against the now division-leading Mariners. However, the comeback kids had other ideas. Edgar Martinez singled off Eckersley with 1 out, then Tino Martinez came to the plate.
Here comes the pitch to Tino. Swung on and melted deep to right field. And that will be flying away. And the Mariners win it 9-8 in perhaps the most incredible game in their history. And 46,000 fans are losing their minds here in Seattle. Tonight, I'll guarantee you, it will be sleepless in Seattle for everybody who is here today, including me.
The loss officially eliminated the A's from playoff contention. The Mariners held a 2-game division lead over the Angels, who were about to come to town for a pivotal 2-game series. The Yankees led the wild card by half a game. The Rangers and Royals were still technically alive, trailing the wild card by 3.5 and 4.5 games respectively, but they had slumped as of late and didn't have much of a chance of catching the Yankees or Mariners. All teams involved had Monday the 25th off, and the Indians and Red Sox had already clinched their divisions, meaning this was the only playoff race remaining in the American League. The last time the Angels and Mariners had played each other was in early August. when the Mariners were still under 500 and trailed the Angels by 12 games. Since that game, the Mariners had gone 31-17, while the Angels had gone the exact opposite, at 17-31. The Mariners had won 6 in a row and 13 of their last 15. They crushed the Angels on Tuesday afternoon, 10-2, opening up a 3-game lead with just 5 games to go. The Angels, who had a seemingly insurmountable division lead earlier this summer, now had to overcome a seemingly insurmountable deficit. With all the momentum against them, the Angels returned to their early season ways. Tim Salmon and Chili Davis delivered RBI hits in the first, and that was all the offense needed to do. Chuck Finley threw 6 1/3 shutout innings, and Troy Percival followed with an inning and 2/3, allowing just a walk, and Lee Smith threw a 1-2-3 ninth. The Angels were still very much alive in the division and wild card. The Yankees got a 2-game sweep over the Brewers to maintain a 1.5-game lead, and the Rangers got a 2-game sweep over the A's, with their playoff hopes hanging on by a thread. For the final series of the season, the Mariners traveled to Arlington for a 4-game series, the Angels hosted the A's for 4 games, and the Yankees traveled to Toronto for 3. First up, the Mariners and Rangers were tied at 2 heading into the 8th when Griffey came up to bat with the bases loaded and 2 outs.
The pitch on the way to Ken Griffey Jr. and it's swung on and belted. Deep to right field. Get out the line, run, ball. It is grand salami time. I don't believe it. My, oh my, what a shot by Jr. And he has never hit a bigger one.
The loss officially eliminated the Rangers from playoff contention. At one point, they were 11 games over 500 in mid-July, neck and neck with the Angels. However, they lost 10 in a row and hovered around 500 for the rest of the season. Later that night, the Angels kept pace with the Mariners. Tied at 1 entering the bottom of the 7th, the Angels scored 3 times thanks to a throwing error from pitcher Doug Jones. It was just like old times again as Mark Langston threw 6 2/3 innings of 1-run ball. Percival retired all 4 batters he faced, earning the win, and Lee Smith retired the side in the 9th, earning his 36th save of the year. There was no margin for error now, though, with only 3 games remaining, as the Angels trailed the Mariners by 2 games in the division and the Yankees by 1 game for the wild card. It was possible for the Mariners to clinch the division on Friday night with a win and an Angels loss, which would have been their first postseason berth in franchise history. The Yankees started off Friday night's slate trailing 3-0 to the Blue Jays. Veteran first baseman Don Mattingly, who had yet to appear in the postseason, led off the inning with a single. Jim Leyritz then followed with a walk. Then Randy Velarde hit a ground ball right to shortstop Alex Gonzalez. The error kept the rally alive, and after a sac fly scored Leyritz, Pat Kelly came up, representing the go-ahead run. Only 1 run counts as unearned because a double play is not guaranteed, but John Sterling clearly said it was a tailor-made double play. John Wetland closed it out and the Yankees held on to their wild card lead. Down in Texas, the Mariners trailed 1-0 entering the 6th, but took the lead on Mike Flowers and Vince Coleman RBIs. They gave the lead right back, though, in the bottom half after Bobby Ayala's errant pickoff throw allowed a runner to score from third and Otis Nixon to advance to third, who later scored on a sac fly. They trailed 3-2 entering the 8th, but had the bases loaded and no one out in the top of the 8th, in part thanks to a fielding error and a Rich Almiral and Vince Coleman double steal. Edgar and Tino Martinez lifted back-to-back sacrifice flies, giving the Mariners the lead. Norm Charlton picked up the 6-out save, and the Mariners held on to their 2-game divisional lead. Out in Anaheim, Angels starter Jim Abbott gave up 6 runs in 4 2/3 innings as the team blew a 4-1 lead. but the Angels scored the game's last 5 runs to win 9-6, and they kept pace with the teams ahead of them. With just 2 games remaining in the regular season, the Mariners were now on the brink of clinching a playoff spot. All they needed to do was win one of their remaining 2 games, or the Angels lose one of their remaining 2. The possibility of a 3-way tie was still at play. If the Mariners had lost both of their remaining games, the Angels had won both, and the Yankees split their last 2. The chance of that happening, though, was only 2 out of 64, or 3.125%. Early Saturday afternoon, the Yankees scored 4 runs in the top of the first off all-lighter and cruised to a 6-1 victory. They were now on the brink of clinching a postseason berth for the first time in 14 years, especially remarkable since they entered the month of September under 500. It was now the Mariners' turn to clinch on Saturday night in Texas. In the top of the first, it seemed the Mariners would continue their winning ways, as Tino Martinez doubled home Griffey to give the M's an early 1-0 lead. But Andy Benes allowed 4 runs in the first and couldn't get out of the second. The Rangers were playing the role of spoiler and won 9-2, holding off any potential clinching party for the Mariners. After the loss, the Mariners and Yankees, if they were still awake, turned their attention to Anaheim, as an Angels loss meant both teams clinched a playoff spot. The A's took an early 3-1 lead, knocking out Sean Bosky after just an inning and 2/3. However, the Angels kept their season alive, scoring 8 runs in the middle innings, winning 9-3. Entering the final day of the regular season, there were 8 possible scenarios remaining. For the Yankees and Mariners, it was simple: win and in. They could also clinch with a loss coupled with an Angels loss later that day. The Angels needed the Yankees or Mariners to lose and then win just to force a play-in game. In the event that the Yankees and Mariners lost and the Angels won, then there would be a 3-way tie. In that situation, the Mariners would host the Angels for an AL West playoff game, and then the loser would face the Yankees for the AL wildcard playoff game. The loser of the latter game would go home for the season. That now had a 1 in 8 chance of happening, or 12.5%, up 4 times from the previous day. The Yankees defeated the Blue Jays 6-1 again, officially clinching the AL wildcard. It was an impressive finish to the season, going 11-1 in their final 12. Now, it was the Mariners' turn, but for the second straight day, they couldn't get it done. Starter Tim Belcher allowed 3 runs in the first, and the Rangers scored 6 more in the middle innings en route to a 9-3 victory, once again spoiling the party. Over in Anaheim, the Angels forced a tie for the AL West by completing the 4-game sweep over the A's. Chuck Finley allowed 2 runs over 7 2/3 innings, and Troy Percival pitched the last inning and a third en route to an 8-2 victory. Had the Angels found their groove again? Had the Mariners' magic run out? There was only one way to find out, and that was with a 1-game playoff at the Kingdome on Monday afternoon. The Angels, who had defied the odd by blowing a double-digit division lead, had now defied the odds by coming back from a 2-game deficit with just 2 games to go. After the Mariners' victory on Friday night, but before the Angels' victory, the M's had a 99.2% chance of qualifying for the playoffs. After the Yankees' victory on Saturday afternoon, the Angels had just an 8.6% chance. Now, none of that mattered, and it was a 50-50 shot for both teams. Even though the Angels won the season series 7-5, the Mariners hosted the game as a result of a coin flip done a couple weeks prior. Those were the rules for determining the host of play-in games back then. Before we get to the 1-game playoff, let's look back at some what-ifs. What if the Angels were able to avoid the sweep at home against the Red Sox back in late August? What if Lee Smith doesn't blow the save against the Twins? What if Troy Percival doesn't allow runs in late-inning losses against the White Sox and A's? What if John Wetland doesn't blow a save against the Mariners in late August? What if the Mariners didn't have so many late-inning heroics? What if Alex Gonzalez turned a double play in the 9th against the Yankees? If any one of those results had gone a different way, neither the Yankees, Mariners, or Angels are in the position they're in right now. It's now the afternoon of Monday, October 2nd. The Angels and Mariners are battling for their playoff lives in the Kingdome. For the Mariners, it's the big unit, Randy Johnson, who just threw 134 pitches in a complete game victory over the Rangers 4 days prior. For the Angels, it's Mark Langston, who had also just pitched 4 days prior, although not a complete game and only 97 pitches. The game was a pitcher's duel, but the Mariners finally struck first in the bottom of the 5th on a Vince Coleman RBI single. Johnson took a perfect game into the 6th until Rex Hoodler singled with 2 outs. He stole second, but Tony Phillips struck out swinging to end the threat. Langston remained in the game into the bottom of the 7th with his team still trailing 1-0. After allowing a leadoff single for Mike Flowers, it was just the beginning of the end.
Well, Lou's answer is yes, but there's Langston again. He follows the ball. No play anywhere. They're all safe.
Wants to go to second base. Again, this ball is not bunted where it should be. It should be bunted down the first base line. He gets there quickly. He looks up a little too quick. But you see, he didn't throw to first base because Hudler was not looking at him. Hudler was looking at second base because he thought they were going to go to second for one and back to first for a double.
This will get it done. Maybe more so. Out at first. Tony Phillips with a huge play. But the runners have been moved up. Flowers to third, Chino to second. And hit it. Now the broken bat. It's fair. Flowers has scored. Chino Martinez has scored. And they all have scored. And here comes Soho. Save! The Seattle Mariners are the champions of the American League West.